it's great that we're seeing, this is kind of a great way to close Pride Month. It's not a perfect movie, none of these movies ever is, but it's pretty darn wonderful. And do not leave right when you think it's over, because it's not over. Stay to the end. And get your tissues out, too. I will say, if we had made this film, we might have named it Solidarity. Nothing wrong with pride, and that's great, but what it's really about is solidarity. It's really about the solidarity between the LGBTQ community and the minors, and more broadly speaking, how it built up solidarity among the workers and the oppressed during the Thatcher time. So we know something about that. We know something about solidarity, and we know specifically about LGBTQ and labor solidarity, because we've been in the thick of it. The party's been in the thick of it pretty much since the start. I want to mention just something personal, that, the Thatcher-Reagan era that you might think of as having started the attacks, the concessions, the cutbacks on labor, really started under Carter in 1979, when they got the first give-back contract from Chrysler, from the UAW at Chrysler, and it was a massive blow to the labor movement, from which we're still reeling. I, at that time, was a city bus driver in Ann Arbor, just down the road from Detroit, and we immediately felt the repercussions of the Chrysler contract, because the very next summer, our contract came up, and we had a very strong, union, and we had won great contracts over the years. I believe that union's contract that was won in the 1977 strike was the first union contract in this country that acknowledged partner rights and some partner benefits, not actual medical benefits or anything. But I think it may have been the first union local in the country that had a gay, we called it then a gay caucus. There were caucuses of all the oppressed groups, and they worked together, and the leadership was black, Latino, and white, and gay and straight. So anyway, when our contract came up, soon after the Chrysler attack, we didn't know what hit us, because the bus company did the same thing. They came at us with just a slew of give-back demands. And now looking back, I think we did fairly well, given what was going on. It didn't feel like it at the time. We had a 3-week strike, and we took a lot of losses, and we did get our first concession contract. But I'm just mentioning this as a start, because it rolled on from there, and my personal experience happens to have been right in that time and place where it was starting. Then came Reagan and Patco, and then came Thatcher and the mine strike. And it's gone on from there. Clinton was worse than Reagan. He pushed through the single worst attack on the working class since the victories of the Depression, and that was so-called welfare reform, the basically repeal of the welfare program. So this movie really sets, it'll take you into that time and place, but, remarkably, it's not a downer at all, because as the flyer that the comrades put together for tonight pointed out, regardless of the ultimate, what happened with the miners' strike, this aspect of that struggle that the movie shows was a step forward, and our class and the oppressed in Britain and here have been building on it ever since. So I do want to just can I have like 5 more minutes? Okay. I want to just take a few minutes to talk about the party's role specifically in the 80s and the 90s. Hi, Cosmia. On LGBTQ and labor solidarity, because we played a big role, and you won't hear about it anywhere else. And I was very involved in it all, and so I was a little bit anguished thinking about this talk. I don't want to be talking me, I. So I'm going to say we, And that is what it was. Huh?
You know French.
Yeah, oui, oui, no, no, mais oui. But because anything that any of us did, I mean, we were functioning as cadre, we were functioning the way we do when we're out in coalitions and other organizations representing the party's politics. And so, all of this, it was the party that did it. In the early, and whereas we see that in Britain it all started, queer labor solidarity started with the miners, with the coal miners. In this country, it started with the farm workers, the United Farm Workers under Cesar Chavez. The first organization that got started was led by a guy named Howard Wallace in the San Francisco Bay Area, who had been active for many years in support work for the farm workers. And it just kind of grew up organically that the farm workers took that step of supporting the struggle for LGBT rights, and they were the first union to do so. And the LGBTQ community took its first step of supporting labor rights in working with the farm workers. Now, once we started doing some of that work here on the East Coast, the farm workers at that time vice president, who was located in New York, and he's now the president of the farm workers, Arturo Rodriguez, he worked with us here too. So that was the first, and really it's always been an unbreakable bond and a beautiful bond. So in New York, a group of people founded in 1986 a group that was called Lesbian and Gay Labor Network. And it was the first in this area that was, basically had the dual purpose of bringing labor and support for labor to the LGBTQ struggle and bringing the LGBTQ struggle to the labor movement. With the exception of the farm workers, at that point, the unions were pretty bad. Had not taken it up at all, and we're not taking it up at all. So we founded this group. We became, actually our very first action was that we joined in with a banner, Lesbian Gay Labor Network, at the massive anti-apartheid rally in Central Park in 1986. And then we marched in Pride, and it was the first time there'd been any labor, specifically labor presence at Pride. And in the coming years, District 65 of UAW joined with us at Pride and invited us to join with them on Labor Day. And so that's how it began moving forward in New York. DC 37 of AFSCME also pretty soon got in there. One of the leaders was from, what's it called, the State Employees Union, the one that was PEF, Public Employees Federation. There were members of the Teachers Union who were among the first there, the United Federation of Teachers, which was not a progressive union, but formed a caucus there and started pushing them forward. I and some others were clerical workers at NYU, and so on. So, and we also, in addition to sort of just broadly working to bring the groups together, Lesbian Gay Labor Network actually was able to actually intervene on behalf of a worker fairly early on, and we did a few things like this, where the union in that case unfortunately didn't, but a worker who was being discriminated against on the basis of, he was facing AIDS discrimination as a person with AIDS, and we were able to, we got a meeting with the boss and pushed the boss back and saved that worker's job. So there was stuff like that going on. And then a big highlight came in October of 1987. October of 1987 was the second big national LGBTQ March on Washington. It was called March on Washington for Lesbian and Gay Rights and Action on AIDS. It had advanced since the first march in '79. It no longer just said gay. We were up to lesbian and gay then. Took a while till the whole community got brought in. But I did want to say this specifically, and I'll wrap up in a minute, that because this is where the party really played a big role. We played a big role in organizing for that march, and we had to fight for there to be a labor contingent in that march, because the organizers of this march, this National Gay March, were like, what? What are you talking about? But we fought and won that there would be a recognized labor contingent. One of our comrades went and lived in Washington, D.C. for several weeks and ran the labor desk of the march, organizing that contingent. When we got to Washington the day before the march, one of the great days of my life, I think, it had been very hard to put together, but it happened. We had the first ever LGBTQ labor solidarity rally inside the AFL-CIO headquarters. And we were introduced by the president of the Service Employees Union at that time, later to be the AFL-CIO president, John Sweeney. But there was speaker after speaker, gay and straight, from the unions, and it was a very beautiful event. And then the next day, the contingent was very beautiful. It was farm workers, postal workers, and a lot of, people we didn't know came up and joined, but we led that contingent. We co-chaired the rally in the AFL-CIO headquarters, and we spoke. There were 2 labor speakers that day, Cesar Chavez and us. Nice. We spoke at that rally. So all of this, was kind of the foundation for the solidarity work. It went on, and eventually others of our comrades were instrumental in helping to push the AFL-CIO to open up, and eventually to create an LGBTQ contingency group. They have the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, Coalition of Labor Union Women, LACLA, Labor Committee for what's it called? Latin American Advancement. Labor Committee for Latin American Advancement, and now they have Pride at Work. Since, I guess, about the mid-'90s, and our comrades were instrumental in that, and for some years held officials' seats in that. So I think that's about all I wanted to say. I just want to make sure that the new comrades know a little bit of this history of the party, that what you're going to see here is some of what we were doing, what they're doing in England is some of what we were doing here, and it's what we will always do, which is bring our class together, bring the workers and oppressed together, and fight in solidarity.